Grab your fabric scraps. We're turning them into something magic today. Hi friends, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome. I'm Jackie. I love using scrap fabric to make quilt blocks. They're very wonky, and today we're going to be making this quilt block and this quilt block. They are very addictive. Today we're trying out a fantastic method by Jenny Doan of Missouri Star Quilt Company, and it's called the Magic Square Quilt. We're not making a quilt today, we're just making the quilt blocks. I'm putting my spin on it by only using scrap fabric. I think you're going to love it. There's no pre-cuts involved. These blocks will soon become part of my new prayer journals for an upcoming craft show in November. Please let me know in the comments if you'd like to see my process of making the prayer journals for this year, 2025. Well, let's get started making these blocks. What you're going to need for this project is scrap fabric, scissors, pins or clips, some rulers, your sewing machine, and thread. So easy. So here's two I've already made. They all begin with a square and then we frame them out. I have already made some squares. These are 6.5 inches, and you can use any size square that you want, and they look like this. And I just made strip sets. I have my interfacing on the back. It's a lightweight interfacing. I put one strip down, sewed this one to this one and this one to this one. I press them out and trim them to 6.5 inches. So you'll need 2 for each block. And if you wanted, you could even use plain squares, and we'll do one of those as well. You could use your favorite quilt block to put in the center. However, it will get sliced. This is one of those that gets sliced and then turned into something else. But I will show you the process. We need 2 blocks for each square. Then what we're going to need, these are 6.5 inches, so you'll need strips for the top that are 6.5 inches. That looks a little wonky, doesn't it? I don't know if we're going to use that one. If it's a little wonky, it's okay. And they need to be 2.5 inch. So let me see if I grabbed the 2 inch. Let's grab some 2.5 inch strips. These are 2.5. I believe they are. So I'm going to go ahead and use that for the top and the bottom. We'll trim these up later. And then I think I will use this one over here and this one down here. And I'm simply going to take it to the sewing machine. After flipping them right sides together, I'll do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you want to pin, you could do that. Let me turn this one around. There we go. After I have that done, I'll be right back. I'm back from the sewing machine, and I simply sewed a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and now I have my tops and my bottoms done. For the strips on the sides, those need to be 11.5 inches long. So these were 6.5 inches long. The sides need to be 11.5 inches long. So let's find some strips that are 11.5 inches. And if you want, I have my homemade jelly roll right here. You could use that. Just use what you have. That's why it's handy if you can make up your own jelly rolls in a scrap fabric fashion. They are so handy to have on hand when you need 2.5 inch strips. And they're already wonky. Same process, we're going to frame this out. Right sides together on this side. I think I will put a couple pins in. Just to get to the sewing machine. And then right sides together for this one. I know you'll be making a bunch of these. And of course your strips can be any size that you want. Your initial block can be any size that you want. And they are so fun because you never know what you're going to get. I love those kinds of quilt blocks. Let me get to the sewing machine, 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm back from the sewing machine, and before I press, this is what it looks like. Let's give this a quick press. Now how beautifully wonky are these? And here's where the magic begins. You just simply figure out where you want to put these. Then you're going to put them right sides together. Just like that. I am going to put a few pins in. Maybe on the sides. Let me look at the other side because I know that I'm off a little because these are just scrap fabrics. So just make any adjustment you need to make. These are not going to be perfect, and that's okay because they come out so adorable anyway. All right, let's just pin like that. Grab a marking pen, a ruler, and then make a mark across the center diagonally. And you're going to go from this tip to this tip. Just make a mark. Kind of like making a half square triangle. There we go. Then you'll simply go to the sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance right along the side of that line on each side. When I have that done, I'll be right back. You know I love these stack and whack quilt blocks, and it's kind of like what this is. You're stacking them and then you slice them and you get something completely different, which is so fun. So here's where I sewed a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we're simply going to cut on that line. You could also use your ruler and rotary cutter if you wanted. Are you ready? There's one block. And 2 blocks. How fun is that? I am going to set the seam on these 2, press them open, and I'll come back and show you that. Look at these. These are so adorable. And then you can just trim off the edges. Of course, we do have to square them up. We could go ahead and do that. I squared these 2 to 10 inches. And I just simply took my Quilter's Rule square block lap board and squared those up. I just put the diagonal line on here to 10. Can I get 10 out of that? I might already be to 10 on this one, which would be good. I just have a little bit right here to get to 10. And I think over here a little bit to get to 10. And there's just like marks for the squares on here. Let me see if I can get a piece of paper so you can see that. And it makes it so easy to square up your blocks. Let's take this one down to 10 and just make sure you have your diagonal right there. That's pretty close. Just a little bit right there. There we go. So that one is at 10 and ready to be used in my prayer journals. Let's see where we're at on this one. Put it on the 10 mark. I think I want to bring it around this way because I think I need to trim the bottom. There we go. I need to trim this side. So if I go like that, here's the diagonal. I think that's pretty close to 10. I'm just not going to do anything but trim off this in the top here. But that is so darling and so easy. Now I told you I wanted to show you that you could use plain. These are 6.5 inch blocks. And again, I'm just going to use some scraps from my homemade jelly roll here. Let's see, like that maybe. And then a little bit right here. I think I'll use all of that and just trim off this because this is such a little sliver over here. And then we'll go like this. So that's the top and the bottom. And then I think I'll cut that off. And I'll go like this. And like that. You'll do right sides together. So easy, right? Head off to the sewing machine, 1/4 inch seam allowance for both. I've got these pressed and I'm just taking my scissors and trimming the tops. There's that one, ready for the sides to come on. And this one. Now we just need the strips for the sides. And again, those are 11.5 inches if you use a 6.5 inch square. Switch things up a little bit and take some of this off. Yeah, that'll be pretty cool. Just do a little pinning just to get to the sewing machine. You could do 9 patches in the center. There are so many possibilities with this. All right, there's that one. I'll get this one pinned. I'll get them both sewed up and I'll be right back. Okay guys, here's what this looks like with just a plain piece of fabric in the center. So it's just as wonky and it looks fantastic. And again, the same process applies. You're just going to lay these two together. Just like that. We're going to do a little pinning just on the sides to hold that in place. And then you'll take your marking pin and a ruler and make your mark from tip to tip right down the center. And you'll go to the sewing machine and just sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides. When I have that done, I'll be right back. I'm back from the sewing machine. I'm just going to take those pins out, cut up the center, right between those lines. And let's see what we ended up with here. Pretty cool. 2 blocks, and they all have different things on them. So I'm going to press these seams and then press them open. But how cute is that? And there you have it. This is the Magic Scrap Fabric Quilt Block. So easy, you're just using your scraps. And they go together really quickly. And you can make them quilt as you go just by adding some batting and a backing and just stitch in the ditch along some of the lines. And yeah, you could throw those in a quilt really fast. And again, I've been squaring these up to 10 inches. This one looks like it could be squared up. It just depends on how I'm cutting and sewing, right? Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a Bible verse and a final thought to encourage you. The Bible verse for today is from John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Reflect today on the incredible depth of God's love for you. His gift of everlasting life is freely given. In moments of doubt, always remember that you are valued beyond measure by a loving God. Thank you so much for watching, sharing, and commenting. It truly means the world to me. And until the next video, God bless you.